Well, welcome back to the Influential Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we are privileged to have with us the one and only Mike Koenigs. I said right before we started recording here that I'm just a lifelong fan of his work. I just love everything he's done from way back in the Traffic Geyser days, Mike. So thank you for being on. Mike's a serial entrepreneur, author, speaker, and it just has got a vast background in marketing. And right now, I would say to you that just as a quick flash, I was following you as a product provider and as a marketer, and you in the last 5 to 10 years have shifted into thought leader mentor. So I really love that shift in your surviving and thriving and giving back. So that's what I would love to talk with you about today is, your journey through the entrepreneurial realm and now how you're really giving this high level advice back to entrepreneurs. So welcome and give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of what you're up to these days.
Sure. Well, thanks, first of all, Mike. Appreciate this. And I mean, the quick background, or just to frame this up, is I started working full-time when I was 16 years old, and I started writing code very early. So I taught myself to program, and that led me to write video games for a while. I started a digital marketing agency, sold that, and then I discovered Dan Kennedy and info marketing, and also search engine optimization back in the early days of websites and that kind of thing. And that led me down the path of how can I combine marketing, which I really fell in love with technology and software. And that led to 2 software companies. One was Traffic Geyser, one was Instant Customer. And then I combined info marketing and the launch world with that, which is, if you go back to the Jeff Walker, Frank Kern, Mike Filsaime, nowadays one of the newer guys is Russell Brunson, at least in the world I came from, at one point I just was like, I was done with that space. I got tired of funnels, Facebook, social media, and what I'd call the business opportunity seeker newbie space. It quit being fun. And it also was expensive and tedious, and it also was a little bit of a trap. The business model of events and escalation, meaning sell a cheap product like a book, then sell a digital product, then sell an event, then sell a mastermind, then escalate. I literally one day I had to quit. So now to directly answer the question, now that we're framed up, one of the things that did motivate me was when I had my events, you never know who's going to be in the room. And there were numerous occasions where I'd do some research on who signed up, and there'd be people who, with a little bit of research, were worth $100 million. There were a couple billionaires in my rooms on some occasions, and invariably I'd meet them, I'd talk to them because maybe they bought a VIP ticket and they were very low key. But then I'd ask them some questions. I'd learn about them. And they said, well, what would it take to work with you, to have you mentor me? And I'd say, well, you could pick this thing or this thing or this thing or this thing. And all of them were what I was selling. They'd say, no, I want to work with you. And my business was so time consuming, all consuming. I didn't have a mechanism or a way to work with ultra high net worth individuals who I knew that I'd learned something from that would really elevate me in a different way. And that really started to nag at me after a period of time. So a few years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get off this hamster wheel. I sold everything. It was like the 5th sale I had. I've sold 5 businesses now, built and sold them. And I'm going to do one-on-one work. I'm going to work with high net worth individuals, help them reinvent themselves, guide them through some of the things I've done, but also the destination, which is simplicity, elegance, fewer moving parts, low overhead, lots of time off, deep, meaningful connections. Like my new rule was I will only work with people I love on businesses I love or can fall in love with. And so now when I talk to, in fact, I'll just tell you transparently, right before we started, up until 2 minutes before, I was enrolling a new client who's signing on to be a $250,000 a year individual. very high net worth, very successful, and he came from a referral. And that's a very different business model than banging on social media, spending on ads, going through a whole getting to know you process. And it's like where most of the business is throwaway to elevated, high level conversations. And then, like in a short period of time, they raise their hands and say, I'm in. I want to experience something very unique and different. So I know that took a little while, but hopefully it at least got the ball rolling here.
100%. And here's one thing that makes me think of what you just described is what many entrepreneurs or the thought leaders, the coaches, the consultants should be aspiring to. You can't start there day one. And what I would, as you mentioned, that client that you were enrolling just moments ago, I have no clue who he is, doesn't matter, but I would bet you that you would agree with this. If you tried retargeting that person, blast emailing that person, LinkedIn messaging 19 times to that person, they both would not respond, and it would denigrate your brand in their perception, and you probably would not have had that enrollment conversation in the successful end that you did.
Yeah, that's, I'm going to call it mostly true. But I'm going to give you too many examples. So several years ago, I wrote a book called Money Phone. And the basic premise behind Money Phone is that you use your mobile phone to create very short engagement videos that add value, but they're one-on-one. And it's one of the ways that I do my enrollments now. So like if I meet someone, I'll talk to them or I'll gather some data and then I'll send them a video. It might be 4 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer, but it's a here's my vision for you video. And that starts a very deep conversation very fast, and it can result in assisting in an enrollment, meaning a investment of $50,000 to $500,000 in 2 conversations, which, by today's standards, they say, well, how many touch points does it take to get someone to say yes? Some people say 9, some people say up to 37. That's the highest number I remember seeing in research data. So the second thing is re-engagement, retargeting. What I've found, so I don't spend any time on social media anymore unless I choose to do so, which is very, very rare. I just don't like it. I consider it to be a turd-filled punch bowl. And if there's a turd in the punch bowl, everyone gets sick, is one of my favorite sayings. But what I do is I do broadcast to it. So I create a lot of content. I do 2 podcasts, a lot of videos. I write for Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine, and I write about my clients that I work with as well. And I do find that having a strong social media presence does elevate brand, and it does with everyone I work with as well. And it certainly re-engages people who have heard of you, and the content marketing absolutely draws them in. Real life example, I just spent 2 days with a new client. Let's see, so 2 days ago, I ended the day before yesterday. And this person met me through a friend of mine, Allison Maslin. I did a webinar for her audience. And then at the time, she couldn't afford me. That was the story. And not too much later, she re-bumped into me just because she started following my social stuff. And again, going back to directly answering that question, yes, retargeting wouldn't necessarily help, but what it does do is it encourages when people see growth and progression. What hurts you is if you don't have a presence. And in my case, I'm essentially selling celebrity. I'm selling status. I'm selling elevation. If they don't see it themselves, there's incongruence. And if they can't articulate it, they'll certainly feel it.
So you framed retargeting in a way once you've made some type of a relationship overture. So what I was mentioning, I agree with you 100% what you just said, and I would like to clarify. Most of the training you see out there is like learn how to write the best ad and get clicks, and then you retarget them, and then it gets you to cold marketing, and then retargeting is not as effective as what you just described. You described doing an intimate webinar for a strategic alliance, getting some interaction there, and then maybe you had a phone conversation or a text. Now, when retargeting happens, they already know you, like you, trust you. It's a whole different climate, and it really brings the phrase relationship marketing into good standing, because I think that too many times the phrase relationship marketing, is connotation is to a whole different industry. But if you can market by building a relationship of know, like, and trust, and now those things, those little taps on the shoulder from a retargeting or a follow-up here or a text there, now it all works the way that it should be. But to someone cold, no. A Facebook message bot to me to someone I don't know, it just doesn't work. But if I've had some contact with them, now I'm going to give it a little bit of a chance to work.
Yeah, I think you know, I do have a couple things that I'm experimenting with right now, and so I'm going to just say yes to everything you said. Like, if I had to pick one form of generating business, now that I know what I know, and after having gone through 30 years of learning and practicing and doing a bit of everything, in the early days, it just wasn't hard to stand out because there wasn't a lot of competition. And, when we started doing long format webinars to sell with in 2008, 2009, I would do 14-hour ultra long format webinars. And we did one when we did one of our products called Main Street Marketing Machines that produced over $3 million in a day. And those were the days. It was just easy to stand out. We were selling a $3,000 information product, and it was amazing, and we had a lot of support. It was affiliate support then. But now, again, knowing what I know, I'd rather build a business selling a $100,000 or a $250,000 or a $500,000 product or service that has fewer moving parts. And again, you do the math. It'd be like, all right, if you want to have a $3 million a year business, what if you only had 12 $250,000 sales or 6 $500,000 sales a year? And the thought of that usually makes most people's heads blow up because they haven't gone through the personal development work of valuing themselves enough to feel comfortable asking for such a number. And that really, that is a very deep concept, and we're hypnotized as we enter into life as doers, where we get paid by the hour for performing a task and showing up. And we, if you're lucky enough to evolve to a state of getting paid for knowing, where you have a knowledge-based business, and there you might be salaried and recognized for that. But then moving towards a being-based business where you've developed a personality of value, where your presence alone or your touch provides value in itself, and your ideas beyond knowingness, right? You can create massive leverage, a shift in thinking that can transform an industry or a business. That's a different mindset. And from a pure business perspective, I know people who have $100 million businesses who never get to exit because something breaks or blows up, and they're not able to draw a huge salary because they're always putting all their money back into the business. So which one are you better off with, right? I happen to believe the one where your family's intact, your marriage is intact, your children know you and remember you. You don't die of a disease caused by lifestyle challenges or compromise, and you've got decent mental health. It's like it's a whole different practice, a mindset practice. Yeah. Life is very, very short. And so getting back to the lead gen side of this, right now I am about to experiment with a partner that does pure cold email, for example. Another one that is using some fascinating social techniques that use voicemail, for example, on platforms. So meaning like LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. And I'm not opposed to anything that accomplishes the end goal, but I'm more interested in whatever the shortest, simplest answer is. Where is their elegance? Where are the fewest moving parts with the least amount of risk? And that requires a mental discipline, a different kind of thinking.
Well, and one thing that I would ask your opinion on, which is, you've heard this over the years. You mentioned Russell Brunson. You mentioned Frank Kern, and let's put your name right in that mix, Mike Koenigs. You guys can send out that email to your list and make that X number of dollars and X number of minutes or days because you've spent a lifetime and a career of building that status and prestige. So when you're talking about doing lead gen, I would ask you, what is your advice for people that are looking to take their brand? Maybe they're entrepreneurs, business consultants, coaches. They need to get that level of expertise, authority, celebrity status so that some of those things can work. So for instance, I mentioned about cold this and Facebook that and Messenger, and that feels you could get away with that. Mike Koenigs sent in a blast email to someone to go, oh, I remember him. Let me check out that email. Whereas I send it and they're like, who? So what do you say to someone that says, you know what, I got to get known a little bit more? What are some ways that I can start to build my celebrity and my status?
Well, here's what I tell the people I'm working with. So I'll give you an example of a guy that I just started working with about a year ago. And I'll tell you his name. His name's Justin Donald. I met him on a trip to Fiji, and he has a unique skill set. First of all, he's written or read a lot of books, and he's thought about investing through a different filter, a different lens. And he's got a very unique way of investing money, very low risk, getting a high return, but stacking multiple strategies. So he gets cash flow, he generates equity, and finds what he calls kickers, multiple ways to generate more income, and then be able to pull his principal out very quickly and then invest it in something else. So it's sort of like, it's this really neat compounding strategy that's fascinating. Well, anyway, I met him and he told me a story, and the thing that intrigued me most, he says, I'm a lifestyle investor. He didn't use those words, but that's effectively what it was. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I don't have a job. I just invest money, and I've got money in enough things, and I produce enough cash flow from my investments, passive income, that I never have to work again. And now I just find more investments. And I'm like, I want your magic powers. Okay. That was my impression. I'm really good at making stuff up and crafting messages that produce income. But I'm not about passive income, because the world of passive income in info marketing is a lie. There's no such thing. Okay. There's always a business that you've got to maintain and support. There's always a team. There's always ads and stuff. And I think it's a crappy business model, personally. Okay. I just don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. Other people are really good at it. God bless their souls. But Justin's method was great. And I said, well, have you ever thought about writing a book? I'd love to. I don't know how. Do you speak? I'd love to. Don't know how. Have you? No platform at all. And I said, Justin, I got an idea for you. First of all, I want to learn more about what you do. And I think you've got a right personality for what you're trying to do. And I think you could really do something with it. So the first answer to your question is, you got to have something valuable. You can't go, I want to build a platform and have nothing, right? You got to have a superpower. And my definition of having a superpower means you have had to have come up with something or modeled it. In Justin's case, he just read a lot of books and he implemented and he got results. So he was his first success story. And he had amassed a net worth of a couple, tens of millions of dollars in a very, very short period of time. 4 years ago, he had a job as a sales director for Cutco Knives. All right, just to give you the backgrounder. And then you need to have some success stories, some transformations. I say you have to be in the transformation business, not the transaction business. And it's okay if your transformation is only you. You've done something, you figured it out, and it gets repeatable, consistent results. And then you got to figure out who is the audience. In other words, I have the 4 M's: market, model, message, medium. Your market is the perfect who. Now, in Justin's case, they needed to be, I thought, business owners, entrepreneurs with money who would like to earn passive income from their investments and invest smartly. Like, I was a dumb investor for 20 years. The first thing I learned from Justin is never do equity investments by themselves. Why? Because an equity investment means you've basically provided a 0 interest loan for an indefinite period of time for something very risky with no promise whatsoever that you get your money back. Instead, negotiate an interest payment, negotiate a percentage of sales, negotiate being an advisor and getting paid for it or something, right? You can get super creative. Well, the next thing is, so it's market, who's your audience, model, how are you going to get paid? So in his case, I said, here's the easiest thing for you, Justin. You don't want to compromise your lifestyle or your passive income or mess with it, but you want to bring people in that you can share your methodology with, who will be great students, have skin in the game, and you'll learn something from them too. So I said, best way to do that is have a high entry point, $250,000. And he's like, what do you mean? Because at first I said, what do you think you should charge for your program? He goes, would $15,000 be too much? And I go, that would suck. You make a lot more than that from passive. Why would you convert or trade your valuable time for anything else? So anyway, here's what we wound up doing. And I promise I'm going to get to the solution in a second, but I think the story is more effective.
Yep.
$250,000 investment to work with them, and you need to have some money to invest, minimum $50,000 to $250,000. That limits the kind of people you have access to. Turns out I actually knew a guy, made an introduction to Justin while he was spending a couple days with me. And I said, Justin, you got to meet this guy. Let's call him Bill. It's not his real name, but I'm going to protect the innocent here. And I know you've told me about money and investing before and some of the things you're doing. I'm going to introduce you to someone who will completely change the way you think about money forever. They hit it off right away, and within a short period of time, enrolled them. $250,000 up front. And this guy is implementing like crazy. He's already told, I know he's already made millions because of the introduction and the connection. So it's really valuable. Next thing we did is I did an interview with Justin. So I did an interview and I called him. I said, Justin Donald's the new Warren Buffett of lifestyle investing. And we published that in Entrepreneur Magazine. So one of the things you have to do besides A, having something valuable to share, is B, just get written about in a publication that will give you high search engine ranking. Entrepreneur Magazine was a good example of that. And it's pretty easy to reach out to writers and say, I have something special to share. Okay. Now, of course, it'd be nice if you performed your content either on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn or something like that to get it out there. But when you get in like Entrepreneur or Forbes magazine or something like that, now what I did with Justin is I called him the Warren Buffett of lifestyle investing. And we also crafted a title for a book. So for Justin, his audience will definitely read a book and they'll definitely trust a publication like Entrepreneur, and they'll be intrigued with, Justin Donald is the Warren Buffett of lifestyle investing. So we invented,
and having your name positioned next to Warren Buffett's name in the title. Yeah.
Because he gets a lot of link love right now, basically because of that article. But people who search for Warren Buffett bump into Justin Donald. They can go down the rabbit hole. And then they immediately go to his website and see, we just finished writing his book last week. It's being published shortly. And it's called Lifestyle Investor, How to Generate Cash Flow, Passive Income, blah, blah. I can't even remember. I'll get the title for you in a second. But the net is, it's a damn good book title too. So to summarize, if I were going to say, how do you do it? Got to have something special. Got to know who your audience is. I personally think start with a high ticket offer instead of a low ticket. And then if it's possible, write a book. Books still have massive value. Amazon gives you a lot of link love. If you can do an audio book, great. If it were me, I'd say start a podcast and start interviewing the people you want to work with. That's a really, really smart strategy. A couple of my clients started doing that many years ago. There's a guy named Josh Elledge. That's what he does. He reaches out to people he wants to have a relationship with. Says, hey, how would you like to be on my podcast?
I think a lot of people miss that one piece right there when they think about podcasting. They get all in the weeds about, technology and just do it, figure that out. But they feel like, let me hear my voice and hear, an interview should be the best door opener ever. And I think that's a big piece that people need to really hear. What you just said is interview people you would love to do business with, and don't pitch them there on the call, but just stay in touch. And hey, thanks so much for your time. Hey, I shared it on my social media. Hey, by the way, maybe a couple weeks later, do you have a second? I want to run something by you. Oh yeah, sure. Whereas if you'd done that cold email, maybe they would have just ignored it.
Exactly. And that's something that, elevating. The other thing is, as crazy as it sounds, I think the most valuable skill someone can learn is how to sell on the phone. I've been creating a lot of content lately. I did a video that I put on YouTube called 30 Years of Sales Experience in 40 Minutes. And I just taught some of my best psychology for sales. And I avoided selling on the phone. And looking back, knowing what I know now, if I have a regret, it's that I fell in love with broadcasting, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not really I'm going to call it a regret just for the sake of argument. I got really, really good at selling from stage. I got really, really good at selling using video and broadcasting, and doing video and doing long format content and doing launch videos, telling stories that provided a lot of leverage. And I wish I would have taken a day a week to get on the phone and talk to my customers and spend 10 minutes each, 15 minutes, and ask them, what do you love about the product? Are you using it? Thanking them. And something as small as that would have provided long-term leverage, because think about it. When's the last time you got a call from a CEO? When's the last time a CEO called you up and actually gave a rat's ass about your opinion and asked you what your opinion is and had a one-on-one conversation with you? And the longevity that would have provided with subscriptions, and the data I would have gathered, and I could have had conversations. I would have bumped into some right fit people who I knew had big businesses and bought the vision of what we were selling, and who would have been open to having a very, very high level conversation about much bigger offers. And that relationship would have made a difference. But I think learning how to sell from the phone, you can't beat it. Learning how to be a great interviewer, great skill set. And again, I don't have a regret from the perspective of I'm glad I learned the skills I have and I had, and did what I did. But I underestimated the value of one-on-one selling.
And the phrase keeps coming to my mind when you're mentioning some of these things. Well, we could start with a podcast and a book, and you need to be seen as the expert in all of these things. You need to know your audience. You need to have good content. Well, the problem is many people have two things. Number one, imposter syndrome. Oh, well, I can't do that. Well, I'm not well, you are, because if you look at the people that email you customer service kind of questions or ask you questions, the answer to those. Well, you're more of an expert than you give yourself credit for, because they don't know the answer, that they're coming to you for help. You might not think that it's high level, but you know the answer. The second thing is shiny object syndrome. You can hear Mike Koenigs' blueprint here and give it a start, but then all of a sudden, squirrel. You're looking around and something else comes up, and the next lady's, you need to understand something and listen to what Mike has laid out here, and have that and wipe your desk clean and your calendar clean, and say, for the next 6+ months, I'm going to follow this. The first step is, the second step is, and anything else that comes up, notice it and put it in the back burner, put it in your Evernote, but give it some time to work. What do you say to people that, because I know you've seen it in your career, that start and then they stop and start and never, and then they're like, oh, that never worked. Well, it never worked because you gave it 4 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be prepared to play the long game. I know every short game I've ever played never ends well. And right around the time you're giving up on something is about the time when there's some evidence that it starts to work. So one of my great mentors, and I call him, he's like a brother, best friend, father, grandfather, mentor, all rolled in one, is Dan Sullivan. I do a podcast with him called Capability Amplifier. He's 76 years old. He is wise, a really, really smart guy. And when I was going through my, I've got to get off this hamster wheel or I'm going to die moment, I mean, like, I just was like done. And the challenge I had at the time was I had built a business flywheel that was escalation based, meaning watch an ad, go to a webinar, buy a $2,000 information product, upgrade to a $5,000 live event, and then maybe join a $10,000 or $15,000 program of some nature. And then at the peak, we had a $25,000 a year mastermind. Classic escalation model. Well, the problem with the classic escalation model, first of all, is there's a lot of potential for breakage and there's a lot of moving parts. At any given time, Facebook can screw you, or YouTube or Google can screw you, and your ads just quit working. Or someone quits and stops watching things, and you wake up one day, and literally $150,000 could be blown on ads that aren't converting because no one's watching the farm. Okay, had that happen before. It's a very expensive, icky mistake. And then, or some of your sites break and you just don't see it or hear about it because some stats aren't working right. Your complex dashboards aren't working right. Or worse yet, so let's say you sell a product and then a pandemic comes along and you've got an event to fulfill and people want money back, all right? There's all kinds of stuff like that can happen. You just don't know. But it's people, it's teams, it's moving parts. In our case with this, I was always selling 6 months in the future and I was paying my bills with tomorrow's money, right? And that can turn into an ugly cycle, especially if some of your marketing quits working right. And that's eventually what kills a lot of event-driven businesses. So anyway, I set that up because that's a typical scenario. And at the time, to wind down my last business, it would have cost me out of pocket somewhere between $750,000 to $1.5 million. I just write out checks so I wouldn't have to do it anymore. And I'm dealing with that as a problem. And then the second thing was, I just don't want to do what I'm doing anymore. So I go to Dan and I'm like, what advice do you have? What should I do? And he taught me the system. He calls it DOS, which stands for Dangers, Opportunities, Strengths. The basic idea is, he said, call people up, just start talking to business owners and ask them, what are the biggest dangers they're dealing with today? What kind of opportunities are in front of them that they can't take advantage of? And what are their strengths? What are their greatest skills that they wish they could spend all their time in or doing, and amplify those more? He said, and you have to have conversations like that without a specific agenda. You just gather data. And after you talk to 10 or so people, the answer to your question is just going to show up. It will become obvious. So I started doing that. I did exactly what he said. I started talking to people I met at events, people I'd known for a long time. But again, someone starting from scratch could just start reaching out to business owners and having these conversations. And well, the bottom line is, as a result of that, it became absolutely clear where my greatest skills were, my own superpowers, and then what people needed and how I could match it together and create mutually beneficial business relationships, a big income stream, and something that would really light me up. In other words, I wanted to spend all my time in my superpowers too. And I called the business the Superpower Accelerator as a result of that. And so getting back to your question of knowing when to quit or not to implement, the secret to all of this is engagement with real people with money, just having conversations with them. And the backward thinking of what niche should I pick, or, what should I do? They get focused on how problems and doing problems, which is a low frequency, low vibration waste of time. At the end of the day, everything is driven by an individual, a customer writing a check to solve a problem. They want to buy money at a discount, like what Justin Donald provides. Give me some education, some knowledge so I can make more money. They want to have elevated status, okay? Or they want longevity, lifestyle, quality of health. Every single product and service really can be narrowed down into money, solving money problems, solving status, authority challenges, being more lovable, or improving health and lifestyle and wellness. And so, but that starts with the individual. And I can tell you that there are some people who won't give you a nickel to solve any one of those three problems because they don't value themselves, they don't value time, they don't value money, or they don't value whatever. And you can go to a different person who might be highly motivated, coachable, and wealthy, who would stroke a check for $1 billion to solve a specific problem at a specific time. Who would you rather work with? Yep. And the fastest way to make $1 million is to have a single offer that costs $1 million. And
so you've got to fish in the right pond.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's the right story at the right time for the right person.
Well, I would just encourage people listening and watching to this to go back and listen to some of these knowledge bombs and concepts, because these are just, years of trial and error and mistakes that you've made that you've now come down to, let me learn from this mentor, Dan Sullivan. Look what he told me. Here's what I wish I had done, and if I could do it all over, I would develop relationships. I would listen to my clients. I would call them and spend time and not bot them and email them. I'd call them up and hang out with them and talk to them. I'm not selling you anything. I just want to learn. What do you like? What do you not like about what we're doing together? What would you wish we could have? So I think it's just wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's shift into the last question, which is, what are you passionate about? I know your wife has a nonprofit. Do you have any passion projects that you're working on right now? And then we'll wrap up our talk.
All right. Well,
I guess this question could take 14 and a half more hours,
I'll make it nice and fast. So, anyone who's followed me for a little while knows I'm a cancer survivor. If you don't, about 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. It just about killed me. And I am really, really interested, not just for me, but I'm really interested in longevity and health optimization. So last week I was getting a bunch of injections, and I'm doing a variety of therapies that are, in just a second, thymosin alpha 1. I got to think of what it is. It is peptides. Okay. So peptides are very, very powerful tools you can get that can enhance your mitochondrial function, your brain function, improve your healing speed, etc. Really, really interesting. So I was doing that for a shoulder and a knee injury I had. Noticeable difference. I've also been doing something called NAD, which is, I don't remember what it stands for. You can look it up. It's basically a injection. You get a bag of NAD, they put it into you, and generally speaking, the next day, you'll sleep better, you'll think better, everything looks better, it sounds better, and again, it improves and enhances your healing process. It's also used with people who have addiction issues. You can get multiple treatments, usually daily, and your desire for addictive substances, even heroin, is eliminated, or alcohol. And there's an enormous amount of fascinating work that's being done right now. And then the other thing that I am completely consumed with is simplicity. So my wife and I, so our son he's 18, left home. He's actually in the wilderness living with a small group for 80 days without a phone, hiking, backpacking, doing survival skills. It's a rite of passage, something we're really proud of. But in the meantime, we're re-examining our lives right now, and I'm fascinated with tiny homes, RV living, van life, bare essential simplicity, living on the absolutely minimalist lifestyle. And we're traveling a lot more, but also doing micro travels. We just jump in the car, we disappear for 4 or 5 days, and we're just getting rid of stuff. So I'm at a stage in my life right now where I am very much ready to put together a portable rig for my studio. I always have some kind of a studio because I produce a lot of content. As long as I got high-speed internet, I could literally live in a box. I lived in a 440 square foot boat, a houseboat, for almost 5 years. I could totally do that again. And I think I got my wife convinced to do minimalist living too.
Hitting the hook.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that. I really find it interesting. And right now, if you're listening to this around pandemic time when we're making it, one of the biggest challenges that we've got to solve right now is housing. A lot of people are losing their livelihoods, their ability to produce income, and low-income housing is a massive challenge that we've got to solve. And I think we can do it ethically, deliberately, safely, powerfully. And this is an opportunity to look at this not just as an opportunity, but to a life re-examination. I mean, when you can't and haven't been able to travel as long as we have since the pandemic started, I think people who are dealing with it in a mentally healthy way are realizing how little we actually need. And that can go for diet. It can go for every part of our lives. And so that's what I'm really fascinated with right now is minimalism. And I know every step I've made in my own life to introduce it and create it results in a lot of joy. I love simplicity right now, and that's why I did what I did with my business. And I found that when I have these conversations, it's drawing in amazing people who are like, I'm there. I'm so ready to get off this effing hamster wheel. And I want to know my children. I want to fall back in love with my spouse, or I want to find that person, and I don't want to find it on the basis of falsehoods and complexities and also the nasty part of life, the bad part of social media that we know is harmful.
Well, it reminds me of that last piece you mentioned. My father-in-law for years would say, we need to get back to being human beings instead of human doings. We just go, do. We got to get the next thing. And you never get there. And it's like the comment you mentioned about you were working for 6 months ahead, spending the money today, and now you got to catch up. Well, that human being aspect, and maybe we don't need everything we have or striving for. So I think that's a huge piece, and it's something that back 20 years ago when you were not where you are today, you probably would have heard that and gone, that's just foreign, there's no way, I've got to strive, well, maybe the people that are listening to this right now can go, maybe I'm not going to be right to the part where Mike is to go, maybe live on a houseboat or an RV, but I can take some elements of that and put that into my life. And does that mean maybe you're not going to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day? Maybe you can just take these little moments. And it reminds me of, the Tim Ferriss book For Our Work Week. One of the concepts I remember from that book is, don't wait till you're retired to take that, retirement. Why don't you take mini retirements? Why don't you structure your business where you can take 2-3 months off and kind of catch your breath? Well, take moments, take opportunities to be that human being. And so I think that you're minimalistic and being simplistic, and that doesn't mean you water down what you're doing. It just means that you are really jealous with your time.
Yeah, I think it's about seeking leverage. I've interviewed Tim and spent good chunk of time with him years ago. He actually was one of my first customers for one of the first products I ever made, right before the 4-Hour Workweek came out of all the crazy stuff. And I've always admired his thinking. And getting back to like, how do you get there quickly so you can have that? First of all, again, going back to find something and produce something unique that's systematic and process oriented that you can talk about and own and name. Do a podcast on it, write a book, create a high ticket offering instead of a low ticket so you can sell fewer of them. And you'd be surprised at how much faster you can achieve what you dream of. I lived under the mistaken illusion for a long time, man. I was chasing it, trying to build my $100 million company, have my giant exit, be a billionaire and all that. When I realized, you know what? Look, you could live in Portugal, which is a nice place. You live in Mexico, for example, really, really well on $3,500 a month. Okay. I mean, like really well. You know, I can snap my fingers and fart and make $10,000. I'm not saying everyone else can do that, but it doesn't take a lot to figure out how to make $1,000 and then 3, 4, 5, and maybe rethink your where or your what's important or what you think you need.
Yeah, the why.
And oftentimes thinking through the lens of, oh, I have to retire with X in the bank. Look, the world of never work again doesn't exist. Okay.
Because if you strive that hard to get to that level and you do make that exit, you are wired to the point where you'll get bored in 4.5 days.
Well,
So,
more importantly, you'll die fast. And those who are not useful, Dan Sullivan has a great quote, which is, the universe has a very funny way of asking for its parts back when you're no longer useful to the universe. And that, and you know, there's tons and tons of reports about men who retire and they die like a week later. But it's about choice. It's about freedom. It's about freedom of time, money, purpose, impact. That's what people really want. They want the freedom to not have to. And that is a thought process, a realization. So I think the real question is, producing passive income should be one of our outcomes and our goals for sure.
yeah.
But also having a simple mechanism for producing income on demand with a conversation without having to have anything complex. And that is something I will flat out say I have perfected that science and that art. And I know now, knowing what I've known, what I've been teaching, what I've been sharing, I can take anyone. I had someone here this week. I taught in 48 hours, I can teach anyone how to produce a personality-driven product or a skills-based or what I'll call a transformation-based product. Okay. The messaging required for it and how to start having those enrollment conversations on the 3rd day with no experience. Now, again, you can't be a nobody, nothing who's never done anything of value. Okay. That means you got to go to school and you got to put in your freaking dues. There's no shortcut for that. You're going to have to live and you're going to have to spend some time doing and knowing in order to get to the being phase. But, it is surprisingly easy. And again, going back to my formula of it just comes down to what you want to earn and what you need. But for most people, $500,000 will go a long way. Okay.
Yep.
I can't spend $50,000 a month unless I started a drug habit, is the God honest truth. There's nothing I really want that badly any longer. But it's surprisingly easy to make $1 million when you craft a $50,000 or $100,000 offer, and know how to articulate a transformation through some stories, and that's really all you need to learn. And if you don't have that for you, then learn that skill set for someone else. And if you have a story about how you're not a good salesperson, I changed the word to enrollment. I call them enrollment conversations. And all you're doing is sharing a transformational short story by listening to someone's deepest desires. And you're crafting a movie starring that individual as a star in their own film, with them as a hero and you as a guide, or your product or your service. That is the art. It's very
love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Love it. And so now I guess I would just ask, what's the best way people can reach out, connect with your content? You put out a lot of content. What's the best platform to pick up on that? And what's the best way people can connect with you?
Sure. Well, the easy way, you can go to my website, MikeKoenigs.com. It's also paidforlife.com. That'll bring you to the same place. And just look at the content. There's a few things that'll show up there. I'll give away some content on like how to make great Zoom meetings. I've got 2 podcasts. The best way is enter into the conversation. And podcasts, obviously, doing what you're doing now. So I do one with Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, who is absolutely one of the smartest human beings on the planet. That's Capability Amplifier. The second one is called The Big Leap, with another incredibly brilliant man named Hendricks. He wrote the book The Big Leap and also Conscious Luck and 50 other books. We do that weekly as well. And if you're on both of the podcasts, you're going to get some great content. If you hit my YouTube channel, I've got some really, really good sales material. So if you're interested in learning and crafting the story that I just described, I give it away. I give away my best stuff, the same stuff that people come and invest $250,000 with me. And the podcast will introduce you to a different way of thinking, which is really every problem you can solve already exists inside your universally connected mind, and knowing what question to ask and what you really, really desire and what you need, not what you want. Wants get in the way of what's true.
Yeah.
When you really let your attachments to old traumas go and feel into what you really desire and need, I firmly believe your universally programmed brain will go off and solve every problem that you ask it to solve when it is not motivated by living in a trauma and a fear state. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole with me, there's a episode on plant medicine that I just did with Hendricks and The Big Leap as well. And I talk a little bit about the science and the art of really letting go.
Neat. Well, I know I will be making sure to pick up some of those episodes and checking out your YouTube channel as well. And I really, really appreciate your time. I think we touched on some things that if we would have laid out a couple, 3 questions at the beginning, we didn't even touch them. We got into some much deeper and broader things that I think make much better applications. So thanks a million for your time and all that you do for our industry. Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure.